Welcome back to Beyond the Beermat, the podcast that comes at you with all the frequency of Ric Flair coming off the top rope, but with much, much more efficiency. My name is Stuart Quigley, alongside me is...
It's Matt, still. Not Billy.
Yes.
The prime-time player at this podcast.
So first things first, before we get into the topic, the main discussion point of today's podcast, I would ask you a question actually. I'll be going through some old footage on YouTube, just primarily because if you've listened to the actual intros of this podcast, I'll throw in a little clip here and there of some wacky, entertaining hilariousness that has happened in the wrestling business at some point. And I've stumbled down a hole, if you will, of Heidenreich back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, but I was really rather much more entertained than I was at the actual time.
Is it because he bummed Michael Cole?
What he did and what didn't do to Michael Cole is, he definitely did.
There was a definite bumming.
Yeah.
Poor old Michael Cole. That's why he's all uptight now.
Yeah, in fairness, if you do actually do like a timeline of Michael Cole's character, he's fine up until that point.
Yeah, the bumming occurs. The bumming.
All that abuse that The Rock gave him was just verbal, and then now this became very, very physical. But obviously you've got the whole bullshit poetry gimmick, and I know for a fact this is complete nostalgia talking and nothing more, as I say it. He cut the promo from the giant fist that come out of SmackDown.
Yeah, amazing. The best set.
Yeah, exactly.
Best SmackDown set, easily.
Yeah. He had a promo which was interrupted by Eminem, which was a 10-minute long promo of him talking to the Divas, and then he had a giant chocolate bar, a giant Hershey's chocolate bar, and the gimmick seemed to be that the girls would go, I'm not sure if they were like, it's so big, I want to put it in my mouth.
Sure.
Puns, things like that.
Cheap smut.
Yes.
To titillate the audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the punchline of this 10-minute sort of segment was one of the girls saying, I want to give you a big kiss, and then she gave him a giant Hershey's kiss. Yeah. And then just to fast forward to one of the, you're talking about Marvel bringing all the teams together for the ultimate sort of combination crossover event. I want to talk about the segment of all time, which is Heidenreich meeting up with Snitsky.
Oh yeah, I was going to say Festus. I was thinking about that.
Duh.
Old Gene Snitsky.
Oh no, there could
the
be
baby kicker.
There could be a Survivor Series team of all these cast of characters, definitely.
Yeah. Well, they just sort of like huffed in each other's face.
I'm pretty sure like noises. I'm pretty sure at one point Heidenreich was, I think, scheduled to face the Undertaker in a casket match at that pay-per-view. Heidenreich would go, I don't like caskets. And then Snitsky would go, I don't like babies, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was their bond, basically. They were two freaks that came together. And is that genuinely what the sort of brand split did, in the sense of, like, you never saw these characters interact, so the one time you did, it actually made it seem like a much bigger deal?
That's just positive of the brand split, isn't it, really? Because you can have these sort of fleeting glimpses of what could have been or what you could potentially want. So these sort of dream matchups. It's not necessarily dreams, because even the Hardy Boys did it, didn't they, during one brand split. Poor old Matt was on SmackDown, Jeff was obviously the superior brother, and so was on Raw, but they'd like cross paths, and it even happens nowadays, doesn't it, when I know Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas are going through that tag team bullshit feud, whatever it is. But when they sort of, when they cross paths and they're like, hey, I know you.
It's really weird actually that only in these backstage segments where you've got cross-brand pay-per-views does the world outside of wrestling seem to exist.
Yeah.
Like they cross the fourth wall. In every episode of Raw or SmackDown, there's no crossing of the fourth wall. We have to be here. Certain characters do it from time to time maybe, but it's almost like a portal's being opened when we get these titans of the wrestling world uniting. And I don't just mean Heidenreich and Snitsky, I mean just any time Raw and SmackDown are together. Yeah,
well they can mix their juices together. They dropped the ball on Heidenreich. Heidenreich was a Heyman guy, wasn't he?
Was he?
Heyman had his back, I'm sure.
Oh.
I'm sure he did, because they chalked him up as this bloody great big sort of MMA style, pre-MMA, like the early days almost.
Was Undertaker was sort of doing MMA stuff at that time?
Yeah, he throws the best punches in all of wrestling and all of this, and look at me, I've got Hell's Gate. It's just a triangle joke.
Yeah.
That's all it is. But
they weren't really acknowledging it as MMA at the time, though.
No.
They were very much in that period of we will ignore this as long as humanly possible, and as it turned out, that was 2 more years?
You can't say it was like the early days of MMA, because MMA's been going on for absolutely donkey years, hasn't it?
It's the early years of the popularity, and just like the WWE, they jumped on a thing when it was already up and running, and then refused to acknowledge it.
It was good though. It was a bloody great big blonde, Aryan-looking man, wasn't it?
That was his original gimmick.
Yeah, with a name like Heidenreich as well. John. John Heidenreich.
You can say whatever you want. The two biggest big guys that we can remember from the last 20 years are Bill and Dave.
Oh yeah, William Goldberg and Dave.
Davey boy.
Batiste. Yeah,
The
what a
Batiste.
guy.
If he likes a cup of coffees, he's the barista.
Sure. Or women's hair products. Batiste.
Oh yeah.
Dry shampoo.
I make that comment every time I see that advert. My significant other does not find it in any way, shape or form endearing. But no, you say they dropped the ball on Heidenreich. I know for a fact that I'm watching these segments back and it's all well and good, but he was genuinely pretty bad in the ring.
Was he?
He was.
I can't really remember enough about him. I don't care how he was in the ring. This could be an excellent segue to the meat of this podcast. It's going to be about, I don't care how shit you're in the ring. If someone can carry you through a match and you've got a decent character, fine. Go fucking wild.
It's fascinating though to look back, because when you look at some of these promos, the guy was over. Right, and he was over when he turned face after all the confrontations with Michael Cole. Maybe because of the confrontation with Michael Cole, but like he genuinely got over with. And I'm gonna have to do an arm gesture now, which no one listening will see. But like if you go back and Google it, but he literally got over doing that in time with his music.
The shanty jig.
Yeah, he was literally just shaking his fists. Not like that. That's going back to the Cole stuff again. But like, it sounds really bad. But was the gimmick a bit more sinister than I remember? Because like his character was like he was a bit simple.
Yes.
And
no, but that's easy, isn't it? That's what you do. If you've got a meathead of a wrestler, just make him a bit slow.
Is it because
Matt Morgan, another prime example of got a stutter.
Yeah. Is it because like a guy that size, if he's smart as well, that's too impenetrable. You can't beat that.
You've given him too much, haven't you?
Yeah.
You can't be beating that.
You've over padded the stats before you even start the role playing game. You've added the cheat code in, and somehow you've got 100% strength, 100% charisma, and 100% intelligence.
You've got +2 on everything.
Yeah.
You rolled that D20.
it's not doable.
That's a fucking nerdy reference right there.
Oh yeah, on this podcast I don't think that's an issue, to be honest. But yeah, like, he wasn't a fantastic wrestler. He got over doing virtually nothing. That gimmick would not get over now.
What?
Look how long it took Braun Strowman to get over.
Yeah, once he broke away from the Wyatt family, it obviously did him favours. But I think even as part of the Wyatt family, he still stood out like a sore thumb because he was the bloody great big monster one, wasn't he?
I think as well, like, Braun Strowman is a much better wrestler than Heidenreich was.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So you wouldn't argue
the
that.
idea of it should be easier to get a guy like that over, but it's been a longer journey. And also as well, I do think it was a weird sort of era of, not necessarily Raw, but SmackDown had this sort of weird cycle of throwing in random guys from nowhere. They would debut. Within 2 months, they'd be in like the upper mid card / main event, and the guys that stuck, like Orton and Cena and the likes. And the guys that didn't are basically guys that you look back and go, oh yeah, like I have done this week.
So summarise Heidenreich's career in 5 words or less.
Molested Michael Cole, wasn't great.
Fine.
I think that's a fair summation.
Yeah.
Okay, they're moving as far away from Heidenreich as possible. Not that you want to do that, because I imagine he has some stories.
Yeah, I imagine so.
We're going to move on then. As the WWE's want to do, especially in the last 12 months to 2 years now, the women's division has been pushed over and above anything the likes of what we talked about in the past. I mentioned to like not 5 minutes ago a segment with which Heidenreich was appeared in, and the women were only there to make terrible sort of vague sexual puns, and that was their role. That was it. And the whole sort of evolution of women in WWE is very apt, because that's the pay-per-view that has been named, is coming up, will be shown, will be there. First question I want to ask you is, before we get into anything else, is this going to be a regular occurrence, or is this going to be just something for WWE to check off as we've done?
Oh, is it like a one-off special? Like is that what we're saying? Do you reckon we're going to have like the Greatest Royal Rumble again, or the Showdown Down South, or whatever they're calling that bloody Australian thing? I think depending on how it's received by the audience will determine whether or not they do it more than once. To be honest, I think they've got a lot of irons in the fire at the moment anyway. They got 205 Live with it, which they're still trying to kickstart, and that was obviously off the back of the Cruiserweight tournament anyway. You've had the Mae Young Classic, which they're currently running, which sort of feeds into the Evolution pay-per-view anyway. They've got all this UK offshoot that they're trying to work on and trying to promote, which as a UK fan that watches it, it doesn't really seem to be as big an occasion as they currently made it out to be, or as they made it out to be by having Johnny Saint as the GM, but then doing sort of sporadic shows around the UK, like,
and not even at venues at like festivals.
They did download, which was good because you've got that sort of you fucking nerdy demographic, haven't you? But then, we've got an odd show in bloody Nottingham in like a smaller venue. We've got another random show down at Brighton Pavilion. And they're just dotted all over the place, which I'd imagine if I was American, then I'd be looking at it that way anyway. Like, you want to spread bet, don't you? You want to start going to different
areas. Trying to like roulette table it, almost.
Yeah, just go anywhere, see if you can pick up like a massive following. Either way, you're still going to get attention on your product.
I think the key word you've just mentioned there is spreading, and I think they're spreading themselves too thin in every sense of the word. If you're going to go, we're going to do cruiserweights, then we're going to do cruiserweights. If you're going to go, we're going to do UK, then go and do the UK. The women thing is slightly different in the sense of like they've been doing this for a while. This isn't something they've just suddenly decided, like a child with a toy. They've just picked up and decided to play with. They've been doing this for a while. They've had sort of this in the works for a while, almost to the point of overkill. I think the sense of if this is a one-off, then it will actually do more harm than good, because it's more of a case of, we have the first ever women's main event of the pay-per-view. We have the first ever women's Hell in a Cell. We have the first ever women's Snakes and Ladders match, or the first ever women's musical chairs match.
So what are you saying? Are you saying that basically this is what's all culminated and this evolution revolution? Evolution? It's still evolution.
To Mistra.
Yeah, this is what it's all culminated at, this evolution pay-per-view. So all this work that all the stars of yesteryear, all as they started progressing from divas to superstars to the female talent, and all this work that's come from NXT and all these indie wrestlers that obviously knew how to work anyway. If it now doesn't work, like you said, they've had the first ever Hell in a Cell match, they had the first ever Money in the Bank match, they had the first ever Royal Rumble match. Now we're at this pay-per-view. If it all goes tits up, does that mean all that work that they've already done is what? We wipe the slate clean? That obviously didn't fucking work.
I think the key here is, I'm going to ask you a question and then I'm going to answer it. I will allow you to answer it yourself, but I think I know this. As far as the WWE is concerned, it only fails if they tell you it fails, and they never say that. Like, look at Roman Reigns. Are they ever going to say, we failed in that regard? So the idea of it busting, I don't think it can, because they're going to big it up as the greatest thing ever, even if the sort of general reaction to it isn't. My thing would be, nothing is the culmination, nothing can ever be the culmination in wrestling, because the story will always keep on going. WrestleMania might be the culmination of a yearly thing, but it's not like the culmination of wrestling. And so this idea of, I would call it almost the ultimate jumping off point for women's wrestling, in the sense of, you could have this pay-per-view this year where you kind of, due to necessity, I know you've got like a good stack of rosters on both sides, have to use maybe people from the past, maybe people from up and coming, like a blend of everything, like almost like the actual brand logo, now then forever sort of thing. And then next year, you might not necessarily have to do that, because you might have everyone there that you need in the first instance, and not have to rely on people from the past. The thing for me is just that, like, this year you have the Evolution pay-per-view. Whatever main events that is going to be a big deal, because it's main eventing that pay-per-view, right? What you would ideally want, and I should point out before I move on here that we're recording this just before SummerSlam, so if we get anything too out of kilter with the date range, so just bear with us. I don't think anything major is going to happen. We have a feeling of one thing, let's put it that way. But I don't think there's going to be any groundbreaking storyline going into this pay-per-view, whereas if you have a full year to do it again, you maybe can get a culmination of a Charlotte versus Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, that's what we're picturing as actually main event. Arguably, the best female performer that you've got on the roster at the moment, Charlotte Flair, versus your star attraction as a female performer, Ronda Rousey. So it makes sense to do that. And then, well, like you said, depending on how the audience actually buys or consumes the product, then you can decide whether or not you want to build it up for another year and then just have the rematch.
I think the easy thing to do for WWE would go, you want to test the waters, have the feud start at WrestleMania and culminate at this pay-per-view next year.
Why not?
It's an easy way to go, but if you're inclined to do it that way, is what I'm saying. We've gone over the potential future of this pay-per-view and the connotations of it, just briefly touched over it. I want to focus on the initial reaction to it very quickly, and this sort of outrage of a certain member of, you're talking about like Download Festival and the certain demographic of wrestling. It's not necessarily, it's a really weird sort of cross-section actually, in the sense of it's very much a male thing in terms of demographic. Women do watch wrestling, this is a fact.
Yes.
There's no disputing that.
Yes.
We go to shows locally and there are women there. We go to house shows and there are women there. This is not a new thing, like the whole attitude era of like, oh, we've got to cater to the teenage boys because they're the ones loving the cock jokes. Yeah, that's not a thing anymore. We know this, right? So when it came down to them announcing an all-women's pay-per-view, the sort of, from a certain section of the audience going, when's the all-men's pay-per-view? Well, first of all, we know when that was.
Yeah, we've seen that multiple times now.
Yeah, there was one not that long ago where women were not even allowed in the arena.
Indeed.
All of that is garbage. The thing I would say about that is, if you're going to try and get away from that mentality in any part of the fan base, whether it be 5%, 10%, I don't even think it's anywhere near that large. It's probably 1% that think this is too much. And I'm going to divulge into another segue, but a fan base of a thing that have almost ruined the thing now, Star Wars.
Yep.
This obsession with, the women characters are getting too powerful and we need to remake it with all male cast, and it's, oh God, it's this. I'm so, I have no problem with the films, but the fan base has hugely fucked me off in that regard. And again, small proportion, very small proportion. But now that we get into this, is it the case of, you said how the audience perceives it, we're not going for this 1%. But the easy thing to do is if it goes away, that kind of proves the 1%, right?
Like you said, it's not going to appeal to the major demographic, the 18 to 35-year-old male demographic that WWE need to appeal to. They don't need to appeal to it, but that's who they appeal to.
Yeah, that's the one they're going after.
Yeah. This will sound bad. I'm not trying to sound like a chauvinist, but the reason we got into wrestling anyway is because of big burly men beating each other up. Mm-hmm. What I'd say is, I'd pose the question, have female wrestlers, female storylines, female gimmicks, the talent in the ring come far enough? Because they reached a pinnacle, didn't they, at one stage when it was Lita and Trish Stratus that main evented Raw.
Yeah.
And everyone saw that as, yes, this is actually us putting our foot in the door. Then for some reason they took 2 steps back, or a lot more steps back, and it went completely tits up with the likes, excuse the pun, tits up, with the likes of Kelly, Michelle McCall to some extent.
The Diva search in general was not, you were not looking for wrestlers.
No, you're looking for tits and ass.
Yeah.
That's what you were looking for, titillation. But now, have we, with the likes of NXT and bringing in indie wrestlers, has the product changed enough? Mm-hmm. Has female wrestling changed enough for you to actually want to watch this? This isn't what attracted us in the first place.
This is a multifaceted answer that I have to unpack here, so bear with. First of all, we obviously grew up watching it in a very, very different era. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that it's the same with any sort of TV show, it's the same with anything. We took what we watched at the time as the norm, and what should be, quote unquote, the right way of doing it. The problem you've got with that is that happens to have coincided with the biggest boom in wrestling history. So that the one thing you would say about the Attitude Era, looking back, and I think this is universal, is the treatment of women back then. Mm-hmm. That you wouldn't want to do now and you couldn't do now, right? The thing I would say to answer your question is the wrestling has moved on, the attention to the wrestling has moved on, but the characters, the storylines, and sort of almost at times the way they're treated hasn't. Lita and Trish, you mentioned, just to loop this all in a big sort of bow, they were kind of the exceptions to the rule, and they were treated as such. Mm-hmm. They were treated as, these are the only two. You can't have any more than that. Even though there were credible wrestlers on the card at the time that could have put on as good a matches, but it was just in the eyes of the beholder, which was, this is the thing, the key to it for me, is that WWE, whatever they want to portray, like perception is reality, this is how they want to do it. We've got to this point whereby female wrestling has moved on leaps and bounds because of the matches that they're putting on and the perception of the matches to come.
Yeah.
The NXT, the way Sasha Banks, Bayley, Charlotte, everyone that was in NXT at the time, they were putting on match of the year candidates, that everyone was going mad for it, and then it was like, wait till these get to the main roster. And I would say that the matches themselves have been slightly not quite what you would expect. But what I would also say is that the character progression, if you want to call it that, the way they're portraying it has been nowhere near up to par, because what you still get is inconsistent booking. Female wrestlers for the dawn of time, apart from Trish and Lita, seem to have been pigeonholed into these two categories. They're either crazy, jealous bitch or a buller. And the faces are generic, bland baby faces. That's it.
Yeah, they just sort of stagnate, don't they? Like the whole Sasha Banks and Bayley, like you said, in terms of, yes, they had a Match of the Year candidate. Welcome to the main roster. You've both held the main belt. I think it's safe to say they dropped the ball with Bayley.
Yes,
in terms of, come on, she's the perennial underdog. If she's going to win the belt, win it at WrestleMania, and she wins the month before at Backlash or whatever pay-per-view it was. Sasha Banks has held the belt more than once, but for some reason, you're now not putting her in the main event picture anymore. She had the first ever Hell in a Cell women match, didn't she, with Charlotte? And for some reason, now she's gone, she's just sort of dropped a few tiers, so she's now at this sort of mid-card level with Bayley again, and they're going for a feud that's been sort of building up for months and months. Generally, you want to see the payoff, don't you? But the way they're booking it on Raw, it's not giving you anything, is it? I don't care for the payoff. I don't care to see each other beat each other up, or Bayley turning heel. That doesn't mean Bayley's suddenly going to become the badass out of these two, and she's going to become the heel and start kicking the shit out of Sasha Banks. I'm not interested.
The whole thing feels like it's on a dry erase board in the booker's office, and it just says the feud is Bayley versus Sasha Banks, and that's it. And there's no more details to it. And then every week on Raw, they do a thing that adds to that, but doesn't really add. It's in a holding pattern. It's been in the same holding pattern for months. You say about how storylines, and I'm all for this, a big storyline for months. This is what I said about the pay-per-view itself. It should have a big storyline
for ages. Yeah, but then it's only, you could argue that it reflects, can't you? Charlotte versus Ronda Rousey, you want to build that up for months. Why is that any different to Sasha Banks and Bayley? What is it? Is that because of the draw of Charlotte and Ronda Rousey?
Potentially. I think the problem you've got is that as I said, female characters tend to fall face or heel into really very narrow branches. The feuds are even narrower because it's either you're fat, you're not attractive, I'm jealous of you.
Oink oink, Piggy James.
Yeah. I'm jealous of you is the one that does my head in, because it's just, imagine Roman Reigns coming out to talk about Brock Lesnar and he goes, I'm jealous of the way you look.
Yeah.
Any storyline you've seen in the women's division over the last 2 years, supersede and in your head go, imagine if that was the male storyline equivalent. Right, the best female storyline that I can think of that I've seen in my entire time watching wrestling is Mickie James and Trish Stratus. Do a male version of that in your head and think about how that plays out.
I don't want to see someone grab another man's crotch and then pretend to fillet him into the hard camera.
It's like, and that's the pinnacle. That's where you get at the top.
Yeah.
Think about what you get at the bottom end of it, which is just like Natalya had a farting gimmick at one stage.
Nice. Yeah.
She her gimmick at this point is she's Ronda Rousey's friend,
which is eventually going to lead to a turn.
Yeah. It's not quite the same, but Seth Rollins walking around and his entire gimmick is I'm Roman Reigns' friend. I exist only through the portal of you, and I will be beaten up in accordance with your feuds.
Yeah.
That happens so often in the women's division. It's untrue. And the idea of, okay, yes, we've made great strides in the actual wrestling itself. I would go so far as to say that at WrestleMania, both last year and this year, featured women in the best match of the night.
Charlotte, Asuka, and the triple threat from the year before.
Yeah. I would even go so far as to say Stephanie and Ronda as well. That's what I was thinking of when I said it.
Yeah, of course.
So this whole idea of I go back to what I said before. What WWE tells me on a weekly basis is what I believe. I watch it, and that's all you can do. You take your information, you take your cues from them. If you're telling me week after week that I shouldn't take these characters seriously, that their feuds are meaningless, that their motivations are useless, and then at the end of the day expect me to respect the wrestling that they're putting out, yeah, I'll respect the wrestling, but I won't really care about it.
I think it's certainly out that you've got more of a diverse sort of character nowadays in terms of the look of the women anyway. Like, they're not trying to fit that generic mould. Don't need to be generic blondie. You might have seen the old meme that went round, not technically a meme, but for Evolution, and they just had lots of blonde wrestlers from yesteryear, like blonde females from yesteryear. Roman Reigns in a blonde wig, of course, because WWE. And just lots of Barbies, just slipped in amongst them because they look no different.
That doesn't necessarily help as well when you look back at previous times gone by where they've tried to push this women's thing and this whole idea where they've tried to push women to the forefront, and then you've got Santino Marella winning the women's battle royal at WrestleMania 25 and James Ellsworth winning the first ever women's Money in the Bank. That makes me reticent to believe that they're fully on board with this themselves. If you're going to go, because at the end of the day, like I said, I'm only going to believe what you tell me. The other thing you mentioned is this whole era of generic blonde, whatever, in the Diva search, as it were, the height of divas as a thing, and sort of the low light of female wrestling. And ironically enough, I would go so far as to say, we mentioned this in the previous podcast, do you think TNA jump-started WWE giving more of a shit about women's wrestling? Because they definitely did. It was the one thing that separated them.
Oh, with the Knockouts division?
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't remember enough about it, to be honest with you. I just remember, like...
Well, TNA made a big deal of it.
Yeah, but going off the top of my head, all I remember from them is the Beautiful People.
Awesome Kong.
Well, she's the one that stood out from them, didn't she?
Gail Kim was sort of holding that division up by her shoulders at times.
Yeah.
To be fair, like I'm not suggesting that WWE looked at TNA and went, "Oh, we have to copy this," but I think that like the times have changed definitely.
Yeah.
That's only sparked it, but that's part of it at least. But just to go back, that whole era. You mentioned, the blonde and all this. It's the blessing and the curse of Trish Stratus, because she was too good for everyone's brains can't comprehend how she improved year upon year and actually perfected her craft and became not only one of the best women on the roster, one of the best characters. Heel Trish Stratus is still one of my favourites, like full stop.
Yeah, you got to remember though, that's the work that she put in.
Oh yeah,
she started off.
But that's on her.
TNA, didn't she? Testing Albert.
Yes, talk about TNA guys. Yeah.
She started off TNA, doing all of that. That's all. And excuse the pun, but yeah, it was just tits and ass, wasn't it? When she came out of WrestleMania 2000.
It's all about generic. It's all about puns. That's it.
Yeah. When she came out as that, that's all she ever was. But then she obviously worked on it to try and get better, or at least a bit more respect than just being like some dolly bird on Albert's shoulder.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a hefty shoulder.
A big furry one as well.
Yeah, like a throne.
Fine sofa, yeah.
But like, okay then, so the problem with that though is that like, yes, it's great for her, but then for some reason that convinces WWE that we can hire a cavalcade of fitness models and they'll all turn into Trish Stratus through time, effort and work, and shock horror, it's an individual that, and Trish's work that did it, really. Yes, okay, maybe one or two of them were better than perhaps they should have been, but I wouldn't necessarily pin my entire hopes on a division. Like, say some guy debuted on Raw in the next week, and then he got over by slipping on a banana. Don't know how, don't know why, doesn't matter. It's a really ridiculous example. Does that mean for the next day, every single debut someone slips on a banana? No. The same thing doesn't work for everyone, is what I'm saying. It worked for her, and boy did it work for her, but is it really weird that it sort of had to bottom out for the wrestling to improve? Or is it a tension? Because this era is what we mentioned at the very start of the podcast, where like Heidenreich comes out, or could be anyone, comes out, the Diva search is in full flow. I'll give you the perfect example. Christy Hemi's theme music when she won the Diva search was Walk Idiot Walk.
Was it?
Yes,
nice.
By the Hives.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that will condition an audience quicker than seeing a woman in a prominent position come out to see that idiot walk. See that idiot talk. That felt a bit sort of too on the nose to me at the time. And then now we're here where we are, where the wrestling is respected, maybe the storyline's not so much, but it's not going to go back to that. It's definitely not going to go back to that.
It won't take a step back that far, would it?
No.
But I think that's the mentality. I'm not going to speak on behalf of females, as I'm not one.
No.
You got to think, devolution is a myth anyway. Alright, so if you've got these role models, the people that are prepared to put the time in and actually work on this craft, so let's not say the sort of standard bearers, so the likes of Charlotte or Asuka, let's say these lower people anyway, so Carmella, she's not the best in the ring, but fuck me, it's leaps and bounds away from what it was when it was Diva search territory.
And also she's improved year upon year, I think.
Exactly. Well, let's have a look at old Big Kaz and Enzo. There's only one of them that held a belt. Out of those three, when they all debuted in NXT, there's only one that's still currently there for whatever reason. But she's the one that's made the bloody career out of it. Let's be honest.
She's got herself over.
Yeah.
Like, you can say whatever you want about her quote-unquote wrestling ability, and there are a lot of people that get really pissy about her having the belt and whatnot.
Yeah, but that's fine. That's fine to get pissy.
She gets a reaction. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. That's the whole point. Whatever reaction.
Yeah.
If you've got a reaction, you're doing your job.
Yeah.
And you're doing it fine. So yeah. Who else is that sort of mid-tier female wrestler? You could say all of the Riot Squad or Absolution or whatever they're called nowadays.
I'm really hesitant to use this term purely because it's got such negative connotations, and they are infinitely better wrestlers now than I will ever be, and they're only going to get better. But I would say they're quite green, and I don't mean green as in green to the wrestling industry, just the WWE. They've been there for like pretty much just about a year now.
Yep.
And they're just sort of finding their feet, as it were, I think. And I quite like this in a sense, because what it does is it gives you a sort of injection, much like what I said to you before about SmackDown, where you've got the ones that succeed go on to really succeed. The ones that don't, you tend to forget about. You're not there going, oh, I hate that wrestling was terrible because Batista succeeded and Heidenreich didn't. No one thinks that. So if any of Absolution or the Riot Squad go on to do anything of any great significance, where they're going to find their feet, and it will only benefit them in the future, and especially as well because you've got, and this is said for wrestling full stop, not just women's wrestling, this idea of being in the ring with great workers like Asuka, like Baylor, Charlotte, Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, being there with them will help them. And so what you will end up getting is, we're talking about this now in terms of like, you've got like a good crop of girls that can go and put on great matches. All that's going to do is just get exponentially better and better.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay then, so what I want to do before we move on is I want to sort of touch on an idea that has been said. I don't think it's going to take place at this pay-per-view or sort of come to fruition just yet. But I just want to get your idea on this whole women's tag team title potential unveiling, as it were.
I'd say, what are the reasons behind doing it? Is it for more exposure for female wrestlers? And if you're doing that, have you got the roster in the first place to actually make that a viable?
In theory, the way I've read it is that it will be non-brand specific, so it'll be both shows, and they do have kind of the roster between the two of them to get away with that.
So females are allowed to integrate from Raw and SmackDown, are they? They're allowed
tag
to
team title purposes, I would imagine.
The other way I'd look at it is, are you doing it for the sake of equality? Is that why you're bringing this in? Are you trying to put females on the same sort of standing as males in terms of wrestling and the amount of time that they're going to get on TV? Are you trying to give them as many belts as the men to make them seem more worthy of holding belts? Because if you're doing that, guess what? You need the female equivalent of the United States belt. You need the female equivalent of the Intercontinental belt.
And so on.
And so on.
Yeah.
You need multiple belts. If it's equality, it needs to be 50-50.
Yeah. It goes back to what we were saying before. If it's a checkbox exercise, then it's not worth it. If they're doing it for a reason, then. My idea, and I'm going to throw this out, which the first thing I heard of, which was a women's tag team title doesn't necessarily stand out as much because we've got tag team belts on both shows. Even if it was floating between shows, it doesn't necessarily stand out as much. So I went even further in my head and I went, why not? Because WWE have never done this. Have a trios championship.
Oh yeah. Chikara style.
Yeah. And then I thought,
Queens of Trio. Nice.
Oh yeah. And then I thought, hang on, have we got the roster to sustain that? And I'm not entirely sure we do just yet. So then the idea then evolved into what I'm now about to pitch, which is a trios championship, but it's men and women. But you're not allowed to have all three of the same gender. It has to be two blokes and a woman, or two women and a man. Sort of like an evolution of the mixed match challenge, but with a belt.
Yeah, but that brings us on to another sort of grey area, which is intergender wrestling. What are you going to do? What are you going to make sure? How are you going to book this? If you've got a team of two blokes and a woman versus two women and a man, what happens then? Are you going to have this intergender mix-up where men can wrestle women, or...?
You could book it really cleverly whereby you don't necessarily have them interact, or you could just book it normally whereby wrestlers interact. Generally speaking, and I know America's different, but we've been to shows before where men wrestle women, and there are quite a few promotions in America where men wrestle women. I don't really see the big deal, to be honest.
Do you not?
Not really.
Do you not? Like, it's one thing for China being able to be like a burly woman that was always portrayed as being able to hold her own with wins over Jericho and Jarrett and I don't know if it was Bob Ollie, but she certainly went over. Road Dogg she beat as well.
Yeah.
So Chyna could hold her own against a man. But on Chyna's part, whilst it wasn't the greatest performance ever, and there was always this sort of comedy gimmick. Comedy's maybe not the right word a lot of the
Beth
time.
Phoenix kissing the Great Khali out of the Rumble.
Yeah, that sort of. There's a
We're taking
funny
it
element.
seriously, but not that serious.
Yeah, I think, given the state of Raw and SmackDown at the moment, the writers aren't going to be able to carry a division.
Do I agree that this
like
idea doesn't have as much legs as I think it does? No, it certainly doesn't. But all I'd argue is that it's something different.
Yeah, it's certainly something different, and this is chauvinistic, but it'd probably make me a bit more interested in the women's division if you slipped a few more men in there as well. Sounds bad.
It's just people interacting. That's all it is. Look at Braun Strowman and Alexa Bliss.
Oh yeah, the mixed match challenge.
Yeah, make both of them seem more of a human being without diluting either of their characters.
Yeah, but that's because it was very niche one. It was all on Facebook, and so it's like we're only going to get this small percentage of viewers anyway.
All I would say is that I'm not saying you should do this, but WWE does this anyway. If you're talking about tag team belts, the people that generally tend to go for them are on a significant level below your mid card, your upper mid card, and your main event.
Yeah,
maybe about par with mid card, maybe. So in that regard, any men interacting with women and vice versa wouldn't necessarily be beyond the realms of possibility that they should or shouldn't be interacting anyway. Like, if you're telling me that like Charlotte backed up with
Bobby Roode.
Yeah. No, I'll do this easier. You're telling me that Sasha Banks and Bayley backed up with Bobby Roode can't take on like James Ellsworth, Heath Slater and Becky Lynch. Like, that should be relatively straightforward.
Yeah. I don't know, Stu. I think, like I said, I think it's too much for the bookers to actually.
I was going to say, like revolution is a thing, but innovation seems to be far behind.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, actually, as we're going to wrap this up, I'm going to go through some of the names. We know that we're going to get Charlotte, Ronda Rousey, new women's champion, Becky Lynch,
Asuka,
Carmella. Why is it all in the accent? Like, jeez.
I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So, in addition to the ones that we know that are on the current roster, you got the old characters that are going to come back from days gone by that we got in the Women's Royal Rumble, and obviously you've got some of the newer talent that are coming through from the Mae Young Classic. And what's the final again? I know you mentioned it to me before, but the name escapes me.
We've got Tony Storm. G'day, Skip. Throw another shrimp on the barbie, you bastard.
Imagine we get this far talking about women, and it's not offensive to women, it's just generally offensive to Australians.
To everyone. And Lo Shirai, which I believe is a recent Japanese signing that was only a couple of months ago she actually signed. But it's good to see that she's getting this push to the Mae Young Classic final, so at least you haven't dropped the ball and just sort of, okay, we've signed you because you were making an impact, and now let's just
back to nowhere with you.
Yeah.
And then in that regard as well, you're also going to get Trish will make an appearance, Lita will make an appearance, your standard. Is it really bad that like she's got no business being anywhere near the main event, but I want Stephanie on that card?
I don't think she'll be on the card, but I think she'll be commentating something at least.
There's a really sort of like fine balance to go with Stephanie, because it's like she should be involved, but I hate how much credit she takes, but I want her to be there, but I don't want her to take all the credit. It's hard.
Yeah, it all sort of changed at that WrestleMania, didn't it? Where she tag teamed.
I wanted her to win the Women's Royal Rumble just for the few. I'm not going to lie.
I imagine how that would have gone down.
It would have gone down well, definitely. And then in that regard, so what I've got is I've got a list of names. Feel free to rattle some off to me. Some of the female wrestlers past that may be part of this pay-per-view.
Ivory.
Yeah.
Jacqueline. She was good.
Yeah.
Michelle McCool. Candice Michelle. Was she a woman that wrestled?
She was, yes. You sounded very sure there.
That's it. That's what I got. Did I say Ivory? I'll say Ivory again.
Fair enough. Ivory could do double duty. Yeah, you could be like, you could go.
Ivory could do double duty.
She could. I've got some names here though, because on WWE's official website they do have what is supposedly the definitive list of female wrestlers.
Alundra Blaze.
She's on there, yeah. It's probably not the definitive list, but I'll give you an idea of how in depth this list goes. As far as I can tell, the Miller Lite Catfight girls are on there.
Oh dear.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily class them as necessarily active participants of the roster, more so abominations of booking. Someone didn't get a payday for that.
Yeah. Stacey Keebler.
That's not a bad show. Yeah, I've got some names here, and I'm going to end with the big one.
Is it Tori Wilson?
No.
Ah, shit.
She's a generic one. Ashley Massaro. Any chance of seeing her?
No, I wouldn't feel so.
No. This is a really random one, and if you even remember who this is, I'll give you credit. Do you remember Chera?
No. I can't say I do.
Deuce and Dominoes Valor.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
She had a name.
She wouldn't get a pop, but I would mark. Christy Hemmer.
Yeah. Made her money in TNA.
Dormera.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, there's a name on here that I forgot was actually a big part of this whole...
Hang on, I always confused Dawn Marie with Candice Michelle.
Yeah, it's fine.
Were they both brown haired?
Yeah.
That's alright then, yeah.
It's interesting enough, actually, of all the names that we've gone through for, like, the NXT, and I've used this pun intentionally, evolution of women's wrestling, there was someone that came through, then got the Bailey treatment in terms of booking, has disappeared, but is on this list of potential return names. Emma.
Oh yeah, the Australian, the other Australian. Oh, you could bring her back in with old Tony Storm for the Australian connection, or the Aussie. What's the Aussie thing?
The Aussie Oak.
That's it, yeah.
Eva Murrah.
Whoa, what are we talking about her? I was going to mention her earlier, Stu. In terms of someone that's been brought in for the pure sex appeal, to someone that's not going to put the legwork in either.
Yeah.
Their careers, it might surprise you, sort of have this intrinsic connection. And what I'm going to say is, both sports models come wrestlers, which is Trish Stratus, Eva Marie. Both models, both brought in because of their whole rather glamorous look. Was one put the legwork in the form of Trish Stratus. On episodes of Total Divas, it was shown Eva Marie wouldn't show up to training with Natalia, so she didn't have the sort of respect for the business.
No.
And she wasn't prepared to do it, was she? That's why
At the end of the,
the
day,
best thing they could have done is give her the vote.
she got heat, but like probably if there's a wrong kind of heat, this was the wrong kind of heat.
Yeah, all day long.
Again, another name that will take you to days gone by, whether you remember her or not. Joy Giovanna.
The name rings a bell, but I could not put a face to it.
Katie Lee Birchall, or Katie Lee, as she was then known.
Wasn't she Winter in TNA?
Yes, she was.
She's the pirate's brother.
Yes.
Paul Birchall.
Yeah. And they were going to do an incest angle, and then they thankfully dropped the kibosh on that.
Yeah. Probably for the best.
A personal favourite of mine, but like I say this more for the angles of the storyline she was involved in. Nydia.
Oh yeah, with part of Seth Rollins.
Jamie Noble.
That was it, wasn't it? J&J Security. Yeah, part of Jamie Noble's little.
I loved all that stuff, and she got better, and it was never amazing like 5-star quality, but just her and Jamie Noble were an amazing like coupling, if you want to call it that.
They were like hillbillies, weren't they? Like redneck sort of thing. Yeah.
Actual Tora, not Tori Wilson. Actual Tora.
X-Pac girlfriend.
Yeah.
Ran off with Kane, went back to X-Pac.
Yeah. The X-Pac and Tori Christmas story.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, I remember old Tori. I can't see her coming back though.
No.
Definitely not.
There's one name left. The one name that would actually make this pay-per-view a huge deal. The one name that can't possibly be there, that won't possibly be there, but I need in my absolute wildest dreams to be there. AJ Lee.
The unspoken name. Their name that shall not be mentioned.
You want to get this pay-per-view off. You want to make it a splash. You want to make this a big deal. You find a way to get her on the card. You find a way to get her on the show.
Yeah. You haven't even got to find a way, have you? It shouldn't be difficult. Just slap her on there, literally anywhere.
Oh no, it's
and
not.
all of a sudden, the Evolution pay-per-view becomes the most watched thing in wrestling for donkey's years. Or since New Japan did their last pay-per-view.
I don't know how you do this, but her coming back as... the problem you've got is you couldn't portray her as a heel. I'd love to, because I think it'd draw big time, but the crowd wouldn't accept it. But I think there's too much in between, and like she's her own woman and that. And by the way, I would fully recommend reading her autobiography. Of the wrestling ones, forget women or men, but of wrestling autobiographies, it's one of the better ones, and I believe it's actually been turned into a TV series as well.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was optioned. But the idea that she can't come back just because Punk is ludicrous, because she's her own woman. But there is too much there, I think.
Yeah, I'll stick by what I said. Just get her on screen, literally
Oh,
anywhere. If she
please.
wanted to do it, let her do it. Just all you got to do is have the camera pan over a group of other women, and she just happens to be stood on the outskirts just as it cuts off, and that'll be it.
Yeah,
that'll
what
drive the internet mad.
Do it
That'll be too much.
Do it even stupider. Do some sort of terrible jump cut of you get the Evolution pay-per-view, and then you just splice in old SmackDown footage or Raw footage.
That's all you need.
Yeah, probably get sued for that, but still.
So.
And speaking of the big time, we've got to wrap this in a nice little tidy bow now. This has been Beyond the Beermat. Thank you for listening. We haven't been sexist. Goodbye for now.